Right then peeps, so Gigabyte X399 Extreme Review. Now please click through to the website if you want to go and have a look at the pictures of the board. There are loads more bits and bobs there. I've also done a preview video of this board already. Now if I was to give you a complete look around the board, then we'd be here for ages, and I've already filmed the conclusion and the testing, and I know I've spoken too much already. So things with the board, it's got a nice heatsink at the top. It's one of the reasons why I wanted the board, because it's individual fins. The actual surface area of the board is massive. The surface area of the heatsink is massive. Other good bits about it, it has got 10 GBE on the back, and that's not going to be cheap at all. So 10 GBE, it's not going to make your internet faster. It's all about internal networking. You're going to need Cat 6 or Cat 7 cables to get the best from it, and you need to make sure everything that it's connected to is 10 GBE as well. So if you've got a switch or a router or anything like that, they're going to need some kind of 10 GBE stuff going on. I personally use 10 GBE in the office. My main rig goes into a switch which has got 10 GBE connectors on it, and then my server's got 10 GBE as well, and then everything else on the switch is gigabit. So you do need to make sure that you're setting it up correctly. If you're going to be using 10 GBE, you're probably going to know about that sort of stuff anyway. Other than that, the board, go and read the review on the website. Today is more about the fact of talking about the heatsink that's on the back, because people wanted me to remove this to see if it made any difference for temps. People wanted to know if the VRMs were any good, and people wanted to know how it was going to overclock. And I have done a stupid amount of testing and stuff to go on with this. So I'm just going to leave it there. You can have a look at the B-rolly bits. Go and have a look at the other video for a good look around the board if you're genuinely interested about that. But today is mainly me trying to explain to you about the amazing amount of testing that I've done, because it was probably around 6 days consistent testing that I had to do with this, because Gigabyte wouldn't reply to any of my emails, and I was genuinely trying to find out what the flipping Nora was going on. Okay, so we're on to the storytelling part. And that's all the testing that we've done, and there has been an awful lot of it. But I do need to give you a lot of the background stuff so that you know what's been going on, because I've had no help from Gigabyte whatsoever. And there were a few things that were popping up that I needed some specific answers on, but I will get there and we'll cover them. So I've got the rig here. I'll explain why it is a test bench, but at the end of the day, we can still cover it up. We can still mount the AIO. I'm using the same AIO that I used for the main Threadripper review. I am using the 2990WX, so it's the 32 core. I do obviously have to talk to you about all the overclocking and all of that sort of stuff. So we do an awful lot of testing, but we've done way more with this board than we have done on a single product in a long time, because we had to go fault finding to try and find out what was going on, especially when we started to do the overclocks and stuff. But literally, like, this is how we lay out our testing when we do it. So each one of these lines is a completely different test that we've done, and it's really not going to show up on the screen very well, because obviously it's really bright, but it's literally, there's loads of it. And this was also, all of this data, and the reason why it is all written out, did end up getting sent to Gigabyte as well. Anyway, so stock stuff, it all passed absolutely fine. We started to move on to the overclock, and things went a bit hinky. Straight away, we were seeing some ridiculous V-core voltages being reported, and it was popping up with like 1.68 volts. And at that point in time, we were putting around 1.3, 1.35 into the BIOS. In with that testing as well, though, we had to go through all the load line calibration settings, because we were literally like, we were trying to work out whether it was a load line calibration error. So we went through all of the load line calibration things. And we emailed Gigabyte about it with literally lists of all of our testing that we'd done, and how we were going through the BIOS, trying to make manual changes, trying to work out why we were getting these large jumps in voltages. Well, Gigabyte didn't bother to reply at all, and still to this date I have had no reply from them whatsoever about any of it, even though I was literally going to them saying, do you know what I mean, help me work out what this is, so that A, I know and I can report it correctly in my review, but also B, if it's an issue that you guys need to fix, you have all the information, because I'm pretty much doing your testing for you. You can get it done your end, and maybe send me a BIOS which will help fix it. Well, like I said, they didn't have a reply, so I ended up going to AMD about it, and they did point me in the direction of a voltage that maybe I would be able to see. Because essentially they've obviously been working with these boards for quite a long time. I did actually see the Gigabyte Extreme when I was in Italy at the Threadripper launch, or the press briefing sort of jolly that I went on, and they were looking at a different voltage in hardware info, and it's the SV12 something it was called. So they pointed me in the direction of that. Now, sadly, you know, they were talking about when they were testing it pre-release, but it's still not been fixed. And essentially what happens is it's the V-core is looking at a different voltage. Now, you would think that Gigabyte would have had it fixed, but their answer always is, it's just the software reporting it wrong. That's why I got in contact with Hardware Info and I asked them about it, and it's not necessarily the software is reporting it wrong. Software is reporting what the BIOS is telling it to, because essentially you have to assign it. So it's more a case of the BIOS needs to be fixed. Now, you would think that Gigabyte wouldn't want anyone thinking that their board is putting 1.68 volts through a CPU. Obviously, it's going to be like with the emails we were talking about before. Obviously don't really care. It works as far as they're concerned. They don't really care whether your software at home is going to be telling you that your CPU is going to be fried. But with all due respect, if I saw this and I was just a normal user at home that didn't want to spend another 2 days looking for issues, I'd RMA it. I'd be like, no, my board's broke. It's putting 1.68 volts through. Software sees it, send it back to the retailer. And that would be a really quick and easy thing to do, because it does look like it's doing the wrong thing. But we got given this other voltage anyway. And we started working on that, which meant literally, because we've been looking at all the load line calibration stuff, we had to go back and do it all again, because we were looking at a completely different voltage, which was reporting it near enough to where we would have been expecting it to have been doing it. So we did all of that. And then that didn't go very well either, because the board was getting, it appeared that it didn't want to overclock. It did keep freezing, it did keep shutting down. We're pretty sure we were hitting, at this point, we did hit it later on as well, but we're pretty sure at some points of this we were hitting an overcurrent protection, because sometimes the board would just switch off when you added any load on it. So anyway, we spoke to Gigabyte, well, we didn't speak to Gigabyte, we tried to get hold of Gigabyte, they didn't help. Overclock, it was really starting to fry our brains. It was like it didn't want to do a 4 gigahertz overclock. Now, with a 4 gigahertz overclock, you fix all the cores to 4. So with the boost, what you can get with the boost is it will flick the cores up. Some of them may go to 4.2. But a lot of them won't. They kind of, the majority of them end up hanging around the kind of 3.6 to 3.7 mark. So by fixing them all to 4 gigahertz, the multi-threaded benchmarks do take a jump up. But it doesn't do so well with the single-threaded stuff or the lightly threaded stuff. So there's a bit of a balance in that going on. Anyway, so we were trying to get that working. We couldn't get an overclock going, and it was pretty much like the board didn't want to know. Until then, we started to turn the volts down, and I mean a lot. So we ended up getting 4 gigahertz across all of the cores at 1.2 volts, and if we went any more, it wasn't stable. So put a little tiny little bit more, and that's us manually setting the V-core in the BIOS to 1.2 volts. It ended up being reported in Windows by the programs around 1.237. But if we went any more than that, it literally would start blue screening and it would start falling over. And I cannot stress, I don't understand why it was doing it. So we hadn't changed any of the PPT stuff or any of the things in Precision Boost, because we were doing it manually. So it didn't make a great deal of sense, but it worked. So when you see all of the overclock settings, it's a 4 gigahertz fixed clock, and we did it all that way. The other thing that we did do is we did do a completely separate bunch of tests with Precision Boost Overdrive. But with Precision Boost Overdrive, this was again the point that we started to get power issues. So we didn't touch any of the voltages or anything like that, although we did have a little bit of a play with turning the volts down and then turning all the power and all of that stuff up. But with the PPT, and this is the first one in Precision Boost Overdrive, much above 500 with that, and it is literally just hitting overcurrent protections instantly. But the thing was, is the scores were going up, and they were going up, and they were going up, and they were going up. Now, we did have to run with the board with a lot of cooling going on. So a lot of people didn't want me to talk about the fact that the VRM coolers look really good, and that was genuinely the reason why I got the board in the first place. Is I was genuinely hoping this was going to be a much better board in that respect. Now, if you had an air-cooled case at home, you would need an awful lot of airflow to keep it, even the VRMs, without direct cooling, even around 100 degrees. That's going to be with a manual overclock though, but that is absolutely handing it its rear end. So it's the worst possible scenario because it's 32 cores, but they do get incredibly warm. Now, one thing people did ask me about was with the little plastic logo, and should you take it off? What a lot of you didn't realise is if you do take it off, there are these hiding underneath. There are little fans there. So the little fans, what are they doing? Yes, you do get a little bit of airflow for the VRM heatsink itself. But if you have a look at the zooming in thing that I did, because I've started to do B-roll, shock and horror, there's another little heatsink at the back, and that is the 10 GBE heatsink. Now the 10 GBE network cards do get hot. I've got the add-in cards for the rigs that I use in the office, and they've got massive heat sinks on them, and they still get warm. I even jokingly thought about water cooling one at one point, or doing like I did with my RAID card and putting a massive passive air sink on it. They can get really warm. So that fan is necessary to keep your 10 GBE cool. If you did just take them off, you're not going to get thanked very much on that 10 GBE thing at the back. And to be honest with you, I'd even go as far as to say I don't think that heatsink is that big in reality, especially considering the ones that I've got in my rig, they genuinely look like PCH heat sinks rather than a little stick-on thing that we used to put on memory chips back in the day. So that's why that's there. Taking it off, it doesn't really make a great deal of difference either way, because the heat sink that it's kind of covering up doesn't actually have anything to do with the CPU side of things anyway. All the VRMs and the heat and everything that on the main heatsink at the top, which is the one that's open, that's where the majority of the heat's coming from. And you've only got that heat pipe that swings around the side anyway. So I didn't see any. I would personally say that because of that 10 GB thing in the back, I would leave that cover on. No, the fans aren't quiet, but you'd need direct airflow over that rather than something that's coming from like a heat sink, like CPU heat sink or something. And I would probably favour leaving that there. I would like to think that if someone made a water block for it, they would take that into account, because you are going to need to keep that. It does get like toasty. If you put your thumb on it and you're stressing it out, it does get to the level of hot that it hurts your finger. So it's not like, and I couldn't see a thermal probe for it anywhere near either. But it's hot enough to make me go, whoa, that thing hot underneath there. Anyway, right, so lots of talk about like fans and all that sort of stuff, but we're getting there, and there's a reason for it. The manual overclock that I was talking to you about, it kept falling over. Even when we did sort the volts and all that sort of stuff out, but what we did end up finding is that the heatsink, sort of like the backplate thing on the back of the board, was getting quite warm. Read hot, because there is some thermal pad there, and there is part of the stuff to do with the power regs on the back of the board that was getting hot. So we ended up having to have a fan round the back of the board, and that literally solved so many of our thermal problems. You could literally take the fan away, run the same test that had just passed before, and by removing the fan around the back, suddenly we weren't getting results, and it was falling over again. So back of the board gets hot. With a manual overclock. Now I keep saying that manual overclock because I'm having to be very careful, because I know Gigabyte are going to go through this video with a fine-tooth comb again. So I'm being very clear about that. It is the worst possible scenario, 32 cores, manual overclock, trying to make it scream its nuts off. Fan round the back of the board was critical. You needed it. You also really needed the heat sinks on the front of the board with direct airflow as well. The weird thing was, is that there was because the heat sinks themselves are actually quite good. As soon as you put a fan over the top of them, It's not like a 10 or a 15 degrees difference. It was like a 30 degrees difference. And I do have a graph to show you that. I'll just pop it up for you now. So you do get like a huge difference by dropping that fan over it. Now, if you see in the graph, it says FFE. That is fans. We'll say flipping, but for us, do you know what I mean? The grown-ups, we know it's a swear word, but it's fans flipping everywhere. So we add them over the top, we add them around the back. And also you can see with the board, I've got the AIO as well. So we had 3 120mm Corsair ML fans at 2,400 RPM, all blowing down at the board. All of that was needed to be able to get the overclocks to pass consistently with heavy loads like Blender. So that was what we pretty much had to go through. Also with the fans on the back, because at the end of the day, it is a test bench, but we sometimes end up flicking the fans around so that they blow in at the top heat sinks as well. So it literally is FFE. You did need all of those for that manual overclock. But it's completely different if you go Precision Boost Overdrive. It's a much tamer, more controlled way of doing things. My mic pack has just fallen into my pocket. As I'll show to you, I've got all of the results, stock, Precision Boost Overdrive and Overclock. I would genuinely say when you see the results, you'll see that Precision Boost Overdrive and giving that a little bit of a tweak is the way forward. Now the PPT for you guys at home is going to make a massive difference. It's also going to depend whether you're running the 2950X or the 2990WX. But the 2990WX, we ended up running 500, 480, 500 as you go across. And that seemed to give us the best possible kind of balance. Sometimes, you know, but it can get a little bit shaky around or above, I should say, 350 on the first one. But if you can tame the temps, then that's when you can push that little bit more and go up to 500. Okay, camera battery change, I do apologise. So VRMs, yeah, it did make a massive difference to get those down. To be honest with you, like I said, we'll show you the Precision Boost stuff. And so we'll bring up Blender to start off with. Now, Gigabyte specifically don't like me using Blender either now. They used to moan at me about using OCCT because OCCT puts an unfair load on their VRMs. So now what I do is I just use Blender. The thing is with Blender is it puts more load on them anyway. But anyway, the Blender results. The thing is, you've got different colours, but take a note of the Precision Boost because it actually did quite well. But Blender was the only really big heavy threaded one that took a little bit of a performance decrease because of not having the 4 GHz across all cores. So if we go on to Cinebench, you can see the Cinebench multi-threaded run is actually much closer than I was probably prepared for, considering, like I said, it is multi-threaded. So there was a tiny little performance difference, but to still be getting up at 5,900 with minimal settings changes was actually amazing. Single threaded stuff as well. You'll see that the Precision Boost Overdrive did quite well. I was hoping I was going to get a little bit more, but then what you do need to remember is it's only ever going to go up to that hallowed 4.2 anyway. It's never going to go further. And I don't think they're kind of designed to, even if you had a board that can feed it all of the power, I don't think they go above that at all. There are many more results on the OC3D website. Please go and take a look. There's a full write-up over there as well, where you can see all the screenshots and the chatting about the overclocking and what we did and the undervolting and the overvolting and all that sort of stuff. So that's all over there. The video was more of an extension to the written review so that I can get my thoughts out with it all as well. So my overwhelming thought about the X399 Extreme is it's an alright board actually. I don't really think it's an extreme board though. So we spoke about like the VRMs and stuff at the top. I think what they've done is this is okay for the 2990WX, but it's more than okay for the 2950X, and I think more people are going to end up buying the 2950X if you buy this board anyway. I think what they've done is they've kind of played it kind of safe, and it's more of it's alright than it's amazing. and that's why I don't really think it's extreme. The only thing that's extreme about this board is the 10 GBE on board, because that is still quite rare, and the VRM heat sinks. I'd say they're extreme because they technically are good. If we had normal alley heat sinks on these, like the normal Gigabyte design heat sinks, we would have been whinging way more about VRM temps. And I don't think those heat sinks would have responded as well to the direct airflow either. So the negative kind of things, big overclocks, and all of my negative things are obviously about the 32 core with a manual overclock, because I'm not entirely sure that the board is completely capable of being able to deal with all the power requirements. The fact that you can't turn the overcurrent protection off, the fact it's so easy to get the overcurrent protection tripping in the first place, the fact that you have to turn the volts down to get it stable, and that's kind of the most retarded thing in the world. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm hoping to dig into it a little bit more. I've even gone back and tested the Meg and the Zenith with 1.2 volts manually set to try and see if that made any difference to those boards, and it hasn't. So it's a bit of a weird one. I don't fully understand it. I think it might just be some kind of weird BIOS quirk. I haven't got a clue, but it was the best way that we could get the board to perform. And you can see in the graphs, it did all right against the Meg and the Zenith as well. So it was all pretty kind of, it was performance-wise, it was where I was kind of expecting it to be. I was a little bit disappointed that the VRMs weren't significantly cooler, but I think that's not necessarily because of the heatsink design. I think that's probably just because of poor VRM choices. I do think they probably should have maybe added another phase or 3 on to be able to have spread that load a bit more. Again, I do need to stress, 2950X won't be an issue. It's just the 2990WX. So I think they know it's going to be all right for most people, and I think they're just hoping that the people that, you know, buy the 32 core aren't necessarily going to go down that manual route. Would I go down that manual route if it was my rig? Yeah, I think I probably would do, but I'd want a full cover water block on the CPU anyway, so then I'd try and find one that did the VRMs at the same sort of time, and it would kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But you do come to the issue where it did need airflow around the back of the board, and it literally was, you can have all of the fans, literally all of the fans on the front, remove the one from the back, and it was suddenly unstable. So that does worry me a little bit as well. So if you're going to buy this board or have bought this board and you're now worried about it, Gigabyte will literally go nuts if I tell you to send it back. But in all honesty, I'm not going to. If you're not manually overclocking, then use the Precision Boost Overdrive, work on the PPT, because if it starts turning off, the PPT is more than likely going to be the issue. I can't remember the name of the one at the end, because you've got the one in the middle that can stay at 480, and the one at the end sometimes can get a bit flaky above 500 as well. So you do need to go careful with those. If it starts turning off, it's literally, and if it is, as soon as you put load on it with like Blender or OCCT or Prime or something like that, make sure you get 26.6 Prime as well, because if you use 26.2 or sorry 28.2 or 29.1, whatever that one's called, it puts AVX on, and then the VRMs don't actually get as hot because people don't realize there are 3 versions of Prime. So get the 26.6 one, that'll put a decent level of load on it for you. If it does start turning off, you know that you need to play around with the PBO a little bit more. Right, so closing thing was, obviously I had to get this board through other means, because Gigabyte, after my Ultra Gaming review, are not talking to me whatsoever. They wouldn't answer me if I could have this board in the first place. So I've got it another way. And then I went to them with problems, and I went out of my way to give them literally all of my testing, full explanations, literally days worth of work, and being like, give us a hand, will you? Your tech guys will probably know how to get around this. Now, I don't know whether they're a bit intimidated by the fact I did so much work, or whether their tech guys really haven't got a clue, but they just point blank ignored me and just literally left it, and I've still not had any correspondence from them at all. Now, my closing thing is, would I give it an award? I'm not sure. I probably would have done for the main review, but I've had to source this myself and all that sort of stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, for you guys at home, there is absolutely, you've got all the data. You can make your own mind up whether you want it or not. The award is kind of, they use it to kind of for their marketing and all that sort of stuff. If they can't reply to emails, then I'm not going to bother putting a little badge on the end for them. But the bit that worries me is if Gigabyte won't reply to me with the amount of testing that I've done and the amount of effort that I'm going to, when all of that effort and testing is literally to try and stop me giving it a bad review. Because if I'd have just stopped at the 1.68 volts and the fact I could easily get the VRMs to overheat, we'd have been making the exact same review that we've made about the Ultra Gaming. But I kept digging and I kept working, and I was absolutely, you know, I had to go and ask AMD for help. I had to go to hardware info directly to kind of say what the fudge is going on with this and how can I get around that and what's going on. And I had to do all that myself because Gigabyte were too lazy to reply. Now, if they won't reply to me when I can literally come and talk to you guys and you know, give you all of the details, and literally you're coming to me to see whether this is worthy of buying or not. They won't reply to me. Do you honestly think that if you bought it and you run into issues, you'd get any help from them to fix it? I don't know whether you would or you wouldn't, but I'd be quite worried, because if you think about the fact that I obviously, a lot of the stuff when I do this, it does get to be like an instinct. It's a gut, which is why you start digging, and it's not always the most technical kind of explanations that I give them. But I've got a little bit more knowledge than the majority of other people. So I'm not saying I'm some genius, I'm just saying I know a little bit more than the mass of people. So I can be easier to talk to and explain to and get stuff through to. But if they don't reply to me, are they likely to reply to you? Are they likely to actually be able to help you at home? Are they even that fussed about it? Because it does feel lately that all right is good enough for Gigabyte. It feels like they've stopped really trying. They've definitely stopped really trying with me. They don't want to know me anymore. They're just happy, right, sod it, don't worry about him. He was honest about a product. We're going to get all butthurt about it. I'm not going to give him any stuff anymore. I'm not going to reply to his emails. All right, fair enough. I'll go and get them myself. But what happens if you get issues at home, you don't understand it properly, and then you go to them for assistance and you post on a couple of forums and it might look like you're bad mouthing them? Are they going to ignore you as well? I don't know. It's definitely not the way forward. And I do think that they've got very, very lazy is probably the best way that I can put it, because they don't seem to be striving to be the best anymore. One of their old taglines used to be leader of motherboard innovation. And now it genuinely does feel like that's good enough is their motto. And meh, do you know what I mean? It's very kind of lackluster, and I want the Gigabyte back that was striving to do their absolute best every single time. And I think it's got, I do understand that the way that they've changed a lot of the managerial stuff, but for the love of God, get someone that actually cares about making a good product and doing their job properly on the team somewhere, because they're severely lacking it at the moment. Because, I mean, this could have been a lot better. With the Gigabyte stuff of old, always used to be all right at launch. Whoever did the BIOS and stuff at launch was pretty good, and then the more the BIOS got updated, the worse the board seemed to get. Now, this is obviously X399, and technically it has been out for a while, but it was a brand new board and I had to move mountains to even get it. So I was hoping it was going to be better. But I think a lot of the issues with this is just down to poor BIOS. And I do think that if they put some more money into BIOS development, or getting some decent BIOS engineers, people that actually know what they're talking about, and then follow it up with some proper internal testing, I think they could get back to making some decent stuff. Because at the moment, as far as X399 is concerned, you can get decent scores out the Zenith, but again, manual overclock, 32 core, the Zenith does get a bit hot. Even that needs extra cooling. So as it stands at the moment, if you want a 32 core and you want the absolute best board on the planet for it, it's the MSI X399 Meg. And I never thought I'd say that, because MSI BIOS was always terrible in the bad, and now they've literally got the hardware down to an absolute T, and the BIOS has started to catch up as well. So, in all honesty, Gigabyte, I'm not going away. I'm still going to get these boards. I don't care whether I have to go to Amazon, go to e-tailers and test them in back cupboards, or do what I did with this one and go and get some mates to help me out so that I can test it. I'm only ever going to report the exact results that I got. Now, if I wanted to badmouth Gigabyte, you would have heard about 1.68 volts and I would have been telling you that the VRMs were bad. But I put all that extra work in, do you know what I mean? Days and days and days of testing. I tried to contact them as well. So it could have been a lot worse, but it wasn't. And I went out of my way to try and make sure that it wasn't as well. In all honesty, I think I put more work into this and testing this than they have.